From Beyond Marketing, it's the 20-Minute Call, a podcast about the dreamers, boundary pushers, rebels, and champions of the skydiving industry. Each episode is a narrative journey highlighted by the highs, lows, and luck that the skydiving industry delivers, as told by the most influential people within the sport. If you've ever dreamed of becoming a skydiver, perhaps opening a drop zone, or becoming the next world champion, check out the 20-Minute Call hosted by me, James LeBarry. Today I have the pleasure of introducing Anthony the Kid Zerbonia, a distinguished figure in the skydiving community and one of the most respected wingsuit pilots in the sport. Hailing from Erie, Pennsylvania, Anthony has completed over 7,000 skydives, with more than 3,400 dedicated to wingsuit flying. His relentless pursuit of excellence led him to become a two-time national champion in acrobatic wingsuit flying, securing his titles at the U.S. Parachute Association's National Skydiving Championships. In 2019, he defended his national championship, earning a spot on the U.S. parachute team for the 2020 World Parachuting Championships. Anthony has represented the U.S. on the world stage, standing on multiple national and international podiums. His list of accolades include first-place finishes at the Acrobatic World Cup, the USPA Nationals, and the Z Hills XRW competition, solidifying his reputation as one of the best wingsuit competitors in the world. Anthony also holds many ratings, including that of a coach, tandem instructor, AFF instructor, rigger, wingsuit coach examiner, and, of course, owner of Tony Narlington's School of Shred. Beyond competition, Anthony's passion for innovation has led him to unique projects, including designing and developing a 4,700 square foot aerial target flag, which he successfully flew by, or really flew through, in a first-of-its-kind wingsuit stunt. His dedication to pushing the boundaries of human flight, combined with his meticulous approach to training and safety, has earned him the respect of his peers and the skydiving community at large. When he's not in the sky, Anthony applies the same precision and energy to his work as an arborist and owner of Tactical Treescapes, climbing and working in treetops, much like he does in the sky, always challenging himself and pushing new limits. With a career marked by championship titles, cutting-edge wingsuit projects, and a drive to elevate the sport, Anthony Zerbonia is a true leader in the world of wingsuit skydiving. I'm thrilled to welcome Anthony Zerbonia to the 20-Minute Call.
Thank you, James. That was quite the intro. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is an intro, man. That was a long one.
Yeah.
You've done a lot in the sport in a short amount of time.
I appreciate it.
So tell me about your background. The name Zerbonia, where does that come from?
Yeah, my father's Italian. It's a very Italian last name. I grew up in Erie, Pennsylvania. Basically, just snowboarded my entire life. I've been a instructor my entire life. So I started snowboard instructing when I was 15 years old, and I did that all the way until I was 22 when I started jumping.
Wow. What were you like as a kid?
I was a good kid. I academically, I did really well. I was a straight A student my entire life. Basically nothing like I am now, to be honest. I hit a turning point when I was like 17 or 18 years old. I was never a bad kid by any means, but kind of started going down different avenues. But growing up, very family oriented. I had a very supportive, strong family. Yeah, that was basically it, man.
You said not like how you are now. How would you describe how you are now?
I didn't mean not like how I am now. There's a period of time between maybe 18 and 21, 22 years old where I was kind of going down the wrong path, and then took a turn again with skydiving. It's one of those stories about how skydiving changed somebody's life, saved their life, basically.
Do you mind sharing how skydiving did change your life?
Yeah, absolutely. I made my first jump when I was 18 years old, and then shortly after that, I started having some internal battles. I was fighting some demons. And it wasn't until I was about 22 years old that I finally decided to seek professional help for that. And through that process, I ended up meeting somebody who, in hindsight, had no idea what they were talking about at all. But he told me that he was a wingsuit pilot, a base jumper, and started talking about wingsuiting to me. And I was like, this sounds incredible. Like, this is something that I want to do, you know? Through that process, I started getting better. My mental health, everything started getting better. And then one day after that, I was just about to go back to college. I was about to do my last semester. I had 6 credits left to graduate. I was doing pre-medicine. And my mom looked at me one morning and she said, "Hey, I'm going to take you somewhere." I was like, "Oh, what is going on?" And she took me to the drop zone to Skydive, Pennsylvania. And she said, I want to help you develop a healthy addiction," which was incredible in hindsight, right? Like, not many parents are supportive in that aspect. I'd grown up doing extreme sports, and she knew that it was something I was going to get hooked on right away. So we went to the drop zone. I made my first jump, immediately hooked, got my A license in 8 days from my first jump. In that process, Mo Valetto was the master rigger there. So we spent a lot of time talking to Mo, became really good friends with my mom. And that was kind of the turning point for me, because at that moment I looked at my mom and I said, "I don't want to go into medicine anymore. I want to be a professional skydiver." And she looked at me dead in the eyes and said, "If that's what you want to do, you have my support 100%. Just take a week, think about it, and if that's what you want to do, let's do it." So I thought about it, and this was like a week before I'm supposed to go back for that last semester of school. And I said, "This is what I want to do. I want to be a skydive instructor." So we had a conversation with Mo, and I told him, "I want to go to Lodi." And he said, "Absolutely not." He said, "You're going to Florida. Pick a drop zone down in Florida. You're going to learn a lot more there." And he pulled my mom aside and said, "Look, he's never going to be wealthy in the sport, right? But the relationships that he's going to make, just his life in general, like, he will be rich, right?" And she's all about it.
Okay, before we proceed, tell me about your parents. Tell me about your mom. I mean, this is extraordinary.
Yeah, she's incredible. She's always been my biggest fan. No matter what I want to do, she's always had my back. She got a lot of criticism from people that we know about that decision and me getting into jumping and whatnot. And she's like, "You don't understand. He's been doing, like, snowboarding. I was breaking 1 to 2 bones on average a year for an 8 to 9 year period of my life." She said, "He's safer up there than he is anywhere else, and he is driving a car." So she's always, from the time that I was a kid, has always supported me with whatever I want to do.
And you have a brother?
I do have a younger brother, yeah.
And do I understand that he has a pretty impressive job?
Yeah, so we're nothing alike at all. He actually started doing his AFF with me, and then he had to go to school just shy of finishing his A license. But he went to Georgia Tech for aerospace engineering, and then right out of school, he ended up getting a job for NASA. So his initial job was working the control arm in the International Space Station. So he trained for that for about 1.5 years, and now he's working directly in mission control.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Wow. So you were heavy into sports your whole life. Anything outside of snowboarding?
Yeah, so in school I played soccer. I was fairly good at soccer. I basically did every board sport outside of school, but I did a little bit of pole vaulting, a little bit of track. I was pretty well-rounded. I did a little bit of everything, but really snowboarding or any of the board sports were my thing.
So you make your first jump at Skydive, Pennsylvania. What was the reason that you went to the drop zone? I mean, it was because your mom brought you there.
Yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
She had brought me there and said, "I'm going to help you get your A license, and I want something that I know that you're going to get hooked on, that is healthy, that you can be passionate about, and I think this is the thing," which was incredible, because little did she know that I was talking to this guy about wingsuiting like a week before, and I didn't know what the gateway to that was. He told me he was a wingsuit base jumper, and I thought that's how you learned, right? And it was through getting my A license and being at the drop zone and talking to people that's the gateway to learn how to wingsuit. So it was very coincidental, but a huge turning point for me.
So you knew you wanted to be doing wingsuit long before you ever did wingsuit?
Yeah.
So tell me about that first wingsuit jump. Was it all that you thought it would be, or?
Yep, that was it. As soon as I put that suit on. So that was also something I wasn't expecting. When I first started jumping and moved down to Florida, I met Travis Mickle, who became my best friend right away. And as soon as I hit that 200 jump mark, he put me in a wingsuit. He told me the night before, "Hey, you're doing your wingsuit course tomorrow." And I was like, "Man, I can't afford that. I'm not ready." And he said, "No, you're doing it. Don't worry about the payment. Like, I got you, man." So I did that first jump, and that's basically all I've done since. Just got hooked on it.
If you're a DZO or DZM listening to this podcast and you're not using Burble, I've got a question. Why not? If the reason is price, what's the cost of your time? Other booking and manifest softwares are a one-size-fits-all. Burble was built from the ground up by a DZO for DZOs to maximize efficiency. Now, isn't that nice? There's no software that compares. Choose Burble. You know, I'm curious about with you is that, I don't know how else to put this. you're cool, right? I mean, and what makes you cool, like I know that you're highly intelligent, but there's almost like an indifference with, I don't know how to explain it, if Tony Narlington is an alter ego or if that is you, but it's a very likable character, and I don't know if it's appropriate for me to say it's a character, but when you're wearing your pit vipers and your short shorts and your incredible mustache, that style. Tell me about that person. Is that you? Is that a character? Is it a mix between the two?
I've been trying to figure that out for years. That's yeah, I mean, some people tell me I have split personality disorder, and Tony Narlington's really in there. I mean, I think there's definitely aspects of my personality that show through, right?
One thing that I admire about you is I feel like you're free, right? Like you're living life on your own terms. You are Tony Narlington with the long hair, the DZ, and, people are looking at you, but it's like you don't take yourself so seriously. You're extremely approachable, but I'm grinding, and I suppose we're all grinding, right? But I care about what people might think of me, or if I go too outside of sort of who I am, and I don't even know how I quantify who I am. I'm not trying to get too deep here, but I admire that you are free to be who you are. Is that natural, or was that an intentional decision? Like, I'm just going to enjoy life as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, I mean, it's intentional at this point. So, like I said, growing up, I was a completely different person until I basically hit rock bottom and then came back from that. And after that, I realized it's a blessing to wake up every morning and to just live your life free, right? So that definitely isn't how I've always been. But yeah, I am relatively carefree. I still hold myself to a very high standard, but I try not to take life too seriously.
Yeah, clearly. So when you made that first wingsuit flight, and you're actually like doing the thing that has essentially changed your life, do you recall that first jump, like what it was like?
Yeah, 100%. I remember being in the plane on the way up with the wingsuit on, feeling like I was in a straitjacket, thinking, what did I get myself into? Why have I wanted to do this? This is terrifying. You get out, open your arms up, and start flying, and it just feels natural. It was the most natural feeling, like the most fundamental form of flight that just instantly hits you and overwhelms you. And as soon as I landed, I just knew, like, yeah, I was meant to do this.
Since you took up wingsuiting, you have achieved at an incredibly high level on the highest stage in the sport. I imagine, I mean, it's silly. I know your mom is super proud, but is she even surprised by how far you've come in the sport?
She's surprised by it, but she tells me every time that I talk to her that she's incredibly proud of me for the person that I've become. She didn't doubt ever that I would do it. She's had my back through the entire experience with me.
So tell us about what you're into today. What excites you about skydiving today?
Now it's the demo jumps. Demo jumps, high performance flocking. I skipped a lot of my progression when I got into wingsuiting. That was solely what I did for years and years in competition. And I got into wingsuiting right when the national competition started, basically. So from 2015 to 2019 or 20, I was on the U.S. team and competing on the national and world stage. And I started getting burnt out from it. I was on a sponsored team, so we were at the drop zone training every single weekday, and then on the weekends we were working. Between that and then transitioning to like 2021, 22, I became more of a full-time tandem instructor, doing 1,000+ jumps a year. It really started to burn me out, and it took me taking a break for about a year and really slowing down to then come back and find that same passion and wingsuiting for fun again, and doing the demo jumps especially. That's probably one of my favorite things to do in the sport. And then getting into high performance flocking and kind of doing all the things that I skipped in between in my progression really lit that fire again for me.
I don't understand wingsuit acro. And I know I have a lot of folks that don't understand because they're not skydivers that listen to this podcast. Tell me about wingsuit acro.
A lot of people don't understand wingsuit acro. So it's kind of a combination of like artistic and like four-way. So there's certain rounds that are compulsory to where we have a dive pool that they pull out of a hat, essentially. And we have to do 3 maneuvers back to back to back as many times as possible. And as long as it's a clean maneuver, then you get judged on how many docks you do. So basically every maneuver that you do, you get a point for. And then we have free routines. So there's 5, I believe. Yeah, there's 5 compulsory routines, and then there's 4 free routines. And in the free routines, you just get to go up and do whatever you want.
How do you judge that? Is judging an issue with some of that?
So when we first started, it really was. And that was one of my biggest issues with competition. What turned me off to it a little bit in the start was it was very subjective. They judged the artistic routines on dive flow, difficulty, and style. So basically the routine that you pick, they determine on a scale from 1 to 10 how good that routine was, and then they determine how well you execute it, and then the camera work associated with it. So it was very subjective. We had a lot of judges that had never wingsuited before that were judging an artistic event. That was kind of tricky right off the bat until it got sorted out and they started developing standards for that sort of stuff. The compulsory is relatively easy to judge. In the beginning of the competitions, we had a camera score for it, and then that changed a few years in and they eliminated the camera score. So then it was just based on style and the number of grips that you did.
Interesting. I could see anytime I hear that a sport that requires subjective judging, like figure skating or anything like that, I have to imagine it would be so frustrating. It's almost like seeing graphic designs. Like everyone will have an opinion on what's done. So I could see how that would be frustrating for sure. So what's next for you? Like what are you most focused on in terms of wingsuiting?
In terms of wingsuiting, I want to get back to doing projects for myself. Throughout my career, I was sponsored, and a lot of the things that I had to do was like social media or obviously specifically promoting these sponsors in order for them to get their ROI. And at this point, I want to limit the number of sponsors that I have getting back into it. I'm getting back into competition this year, and I just want to do it for myself. The biggest thing I want to start working on, kind of like the flag jump, is projects. Just putting stuff together that's never been done before and doing it for myself, not doing it for the clout or the social media. Just doing it to push the limit of myself and what I can do.
Explain that to me, because I've seen a couple stunts. We're going to talk about those in a moment. How does your brain work? Are you sitting or are you laying in bed at night just thinking about things that have never been done before and what you can do? I mean, where does the ideation come from?
I don't necessarily think about them too much ahead of time. Sometimes something just comes across my head and I think that can't be done, or that hasn't been done before. How can I make that happen? And then that's when my mind starts turning.
So what I want to have you tell me a story, is I have seen a video of where you are essentially being winched. So you're on the ground, you've got a canopy connected to you, and you are being, I don't know, I suppose it's a super fast winch, and you do take flight above a tree line, and then you release, I suppose you release the winch line, fly, and then cut away into a pond. Can you just walk us through that? Because when I watch that, I'm like, everybody that sees that there's a full like shaking of the head. Like, no, this is so crazy. But how calculating was it? I mean, in retrospect, as you reflect on it, would you do it again? Just talk us through that whole story. And for those that are listening to this, make sure to look into the show notes of the video link of what we're referring to here.
Yeah, that was probably on the list of the dumbest things I've ever done, top 3, if not all the way at the top. So my buddy owned a property out in Chester, and he had this little pond in the front yard. And for a while, we were talking about building like a tower or some way to jump into it. And then we started thinking like, oh, what if we launch a canopy and we fly the canopy over it and we cut it away? So for a while, for almost a year or so, we were trying to figure out how to tow in with a 4-wheeler. Had several accidents from canopies collapsing, and we were trying on I had like a mountain board, an old mountain board. I was trying to get towed in to see how much speed we could get going towards the pond, and took a digger on the driveway, basically broke my tailbone. So we spent a while doing that, and then one day we walked over to the maintenance hangar and we saw that the DZO had thrown away a Parafoil 292. We're like, oh, that could work. So I grabbed that out of the trash can. I went out a couple days later and I rented dive gear so I could figure out how deep the pond was, figure out the deepest spot so I could chop. And then we ended up getting a spool of Dacron, 1,000-pound Dacron. We had like 1,200 feet of it. And we were thinking, like, how do we create a winch? So we took a Silverado 1500 and we jacked the rear wheels up off the ground. We ratchet strapped another rim to the side of the back wheel and tied it off on there so we could spool it up real quick. And then we had somebody sitting at the top of the driveway on radio without realizing that there was like a 5-second delay or so on the radios. Put a climbing harness on, all the way up at the top of the field. I'm sitting on like a kayak roller, something that could roll me a little bit while we got enough speed to inflate the canopy. Tried once, it didn't work. Granted, I had a broken ankle. I had broken my ankle like a month before this. I just got out of the cast. I had a splint on. So we go for the second attempt, and he hammers down on the gas, and I'm screaming to the guy, stop, no, tell him to stop. And he's like, yeah, man, it's all good, keep going. There's a huge delay in the radio, so he just floors it. I start getting launched into the air. The tow line starts drifting left, almost catches a tree, which would have been horrible. I mean, 40 feet off the ground or so, if that line would have broke or hit the tree, it would have surged me right into the ground. Started drifting back right. What you don't see in the video is right when I get to the apex, what we didn't calculate is the downward force pulling against me. So I felt like it was going to separate my hip and the climbing harness the whole time. At the same time, the ratchet strap snapped off of the truck, so it shot that rim into the pond, almost hit somebody who was standing right there. Ended up having to pick my feet up to clear that tree. I didn't cut it away at the top. The rim snapped. Flew over the pond, and I knew I was only over what was about 5 feet deep of water because I had dove it a couple days prior, but I told everybody my minimum cutaway altitude was 50 feet, so I just cut it away anyways. Smacked a log on the bottom of the water, messed my ankle up a little bit more, but it was worth it. Would never do it again.
I mean, it was epic. It's one of the most extraordinary things I've ever seen, honestly.
Well, thank you.
Glad it was worth the pain, for sure.
Yeah.
Tell me another story. The most recent video I've seen of you is you flying through the center of a flag that basically had a hole in it. And it's one thing to fly through, I've seen wingsuit-based folks flying through sort of a fixed target, but this was extraordinary because the flag is moving. And maybe that's not a big deal to you, but, there's a lot of variables at play for your entrance and exit through this flag. Can you talk us through how this idea came to be and then the execution of it?
Yeah, it actually started as a joke. Chuck Hammond, legendary flag jumper, demo jumper, we call him Fuckless Chuck. He just doesn't care about much, right? Not safety-wise. And one day we're on a demo, and he's like, man, it would be really cool to fly through a flag. And I said, yeah, let's make that happen. So I started thinking about it. We were talking about getting like a 2,000-foot flag, cutting a hole in it. The problem is the cost of the material, right? You're looking at $2 to $3 per square foot. And I was thinking, after that conversation with him, I need to make this big, like 3,000, 4,000 square foot flag, which, you're looking at like $12,000 in material alone. So I had mentioned this idea to somebody else, to Doug McCowan, Paul McCowan's son, who I've done a couple demos for. And he's like, man, I might have something that would work for you. He had a 4,000 square foot flag that wasn't really airworthy anymore. And he said, I'll sell you this flag. You can get it up and running and do what you need to do with it. And I was like, oh man, this is going to happen. So I bought the flag and then did a little bit of math, ran some numbers to figure out the size of the hole that I could cut into it to still get the flag to fly normal without too much oscillation in the hole. I wanted it a little bit smaller to make it tighter, but I was afraid it was going to oscillate and kind of pull that thing in horizontally a little bit too much. So I cut it to what I thought was just below the maximum diameter to affect the performance of the flag. Got the flag airworthy again, cut the circle in the middle of it. The hardest part was developing the flag bag. I didn't have a template for it. I just had a little 1,000 square foot flag bag. So I had to develop one of those, put everything together, and the flag barely fit in it, luckily. Chuck's like, yeah, let's try it out, man. So we went up first, and he just dumped the flag in order for me to get some fly sight data on it to see what the total speed was, whether it was going to open, if my bag was even going to work. And this guy, balls of steel. He's got a 50-pound sack of lead on the bottom of this flag that he's free falling almost 60 feet onto his laterals to deploy the flag, and he didn't think twice about it. He's like, yeah, let's do it. Worked flawlessly. Flew next to the flag, figured out it was doing about 35 miles an hour total speed, and that hole just stayed perfect. Maybe a week or so later, we packed the flag back up, and I wanted to get video of it. Again, I'm not huge into social media. I didn't do this for social media to promote myself, but a couple people at the drop zone had heard about it, and they're like, yeah, we need to get video of this. Let me come on the jump. So the first one, I told everybody it was going to be a run-up because the biggest thing was the possibility of a collision with somebody if they were on the backside of the flag under canopy, not where I wanted them to be. So I told them, hey, why don't you guys just hang out like above and behind the flag? The first one's just going to be a practice jump. Like, don't worry about getting tight to the flag, knowing I was going to hit at that jump. And everything lined up well, flew through the center of it.
So one practice jump, and then the second jump right through.
Yeah, the first one was no wingsuit. The first one was just me under canopy flying next to it to observe the hole and get video of it. And the second one was in a wingsuit, which was my first jump on that wingsuit too, which is a little bit scary.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
You've hurt yourself so much, through the years since being a kid. I would imagine when one hurts themselves a lot, you start getting a fear of hurting yourself again. That doesn't seem to be happening with you. Explain that.
So it actually does to a degree. I feel relatively safe in the sport of skydiving compared to other sports. Growing up snowboarding, downhill mountain biking, I used to do a lot of downhill mountain biking, and I gave that up like 2 years ago. Like, minor injuries almost every time you go out, and to me, it's just not worth it anymore, So I do definitely still have a fear of getting hurt, almost more so now because I own a business outside of skydiving, and my financial stability depends on me being 100% every day that I go to work. So I do take risks, but I take very calculated risks. I don't think a lot of people see that, but like even the flag jump, right? There's a lot of math and a lot of pre-planning that went into it, all the way down to the exact timing, down to the second, and the heading that we needed on the jump run and the go around and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, I'm definitely a little bit afraid of getting hurt now. I'm getting old.
We've all lost a lot of friends in the sport. And as you're pushing the limits, do you tend to slow down because, hey, we've lost people that have pushed the limits? Does that factor into any of your equation?
Not necessarily. I don't do any base jumping, which is completely different. The majority of, I've known a lot of people that have unfortunately passed away, a lot of very good friends of mine. And the majority of the time it's either through accidents or base jumping. I would say base jumping 60, 70% of the time. So with what I'm doing, primarily skydiving, I don't necessarily slow down after stuff like that. It definitely takes a toll on me mentally, and that causes me to slow down a little bit, but not as much as you would think.
Okay, interesting. I recently interviewed Matt Blank, and I can't remember who else it was, but another base jumper, and talking about this push-pull, and I assume you saw Fly.
Yes.
And in watching Fly, I was fascinated by seeing these folks that are in relationships together, where you're pushing the limits, and then you get somebody in your life, or you have a kid, and there's this push-pull of being so passionate about the sport and pushing the limits, if you will, pushing your own limits, and then having to pull back. And that's a foreign place to have to pull back, right? Because you've only ever just sent it every single time. But then I think when you start pulling back, that in itself is its own set of dangers, where almost maybe overanalysis can lead to paralysis, or you're not in a flow state to accomplish what you want to accomplish because there's reservation. There's a little bit of hesitation. Have you ever experienced that at all?
To be honest, not really. I've almost sort of lived my life selfishly. Not 100%, right? Like I've been in a relationship for the past 5 years, and there's definitely a little bit of push and pull, but I feel like in the sport and what we're doing, we're relatively safe. So there's not too much of that involved, at least from my perspective. So no, to be honest.
You've made a conscious choice not to base jump. Is that because you feel like the risk quotient is too high, or you just don't have an interest?
So I definitely had an interest in it when I initially started jumping. Fortunately enough for me, I couldn't afford to travel and I couldn't afford to get into it. And I'm very glad that I didn't, because I was a completely different flyer. I wasn't a dangerous flyer, but I was definitely more willing to push the limits, and I was in a different mind space, right? I feel like at this point, it's something I would like to do eventually, and I think I could definitely do it more conservatively now than I would have 10 years ago. But it's definitely not something that I'm in a hurry to get into, and I don't see myself doing these gnarly proximity lines. If it's something I get into, like maybe sub-terminal, maybe a big wall here and there, but nothing crazy.
Yeah. Tell me about tandem wingsuit. We're seeing this in Europe now. I imagine it's a matter of time before we see it in the US. Is this something that excites you? Is this a good thing for the sport? What's your opinion?
Yeah, that's, believe it or not, something I'm actually working on right now with the manufacturer. I can't talk too much about that process, but yeah, I think it's definitely something that would be beneficial to the sport. There's already been conversations of it, and there's been some pushback about it. It technically doesn't break any FARs or BSRs. There's only one BSR that it potentially breaks that could be waived. The biggest thing is people saying, why would you want to introduce this extra risk, this additional risk, right? It's the same thing they said when tandem skydiving in general started. It was a waiverable activity. Everybody's like, why would you do this? The sport wouldn't exist right now if we didn't incorporate tandem wingsuiting. As a tandem instructor with over 3,000 tandem jumps, I can tell you like 50% of the students that I jump with ask me if I've ever flown a squirrel suit before. So being able to bring that discipline to the public and have them be able to come and do a wingsuit jump, even though it's not a true wingsuit jump, they would be strapped to somebody in a wingsuit. Not only will that introduce more people to the sport, but it just allows us to share our passion even more with the general public, right?
Without question, what fascinates the general public is wingsuits. Because that discipline is scaling so much, it's so common now. What are your pet peeves? Like, what advice? What are the things that you're seeing that are like, oh man, this is not ideal? That you should flag, to young jumpers wanting to get into the discipline.
Are you saying pre-wingsuiting or wingsuiting in general?
No, like once you start into wingsuiting, because it's becoming so commonplace. What's your take on it? I mean, what are essentially the things that you're seeing in the sport right now that maybe is on the edge or you feel that needs tightening up, because you're very calculated with your risk assessment?
Progression in general. It's almost the same progression that you see in canopy piloting when people are rapidly downsizing too quickly. It's the same thing in wingsuiting with people rapidly upsizing too quickly. They're flying larger suits, which gives them more power, more total speed, less control. The issue that people have is just trying to get into that suit that everybody else is flying, or that the best flyers are flying at the drop zone, and thinking that that's going to allow them to fly with those people, and it's not. As a wingsuit coach and as an examiner, I really harp and stress on people to learn the fundamentals. You should be able to do everything you could possibly do in a suit before you upsize to the next suit. There's no reason to just rush and get into the bigger suit, or to even take a step before you're able to fly it on your back, before you're able to fly it at every angle, before you can do barrel rolls, clean transitions without losing altitude. That's my biggest thing, is people just trying to progress way too quickly.
If you're a fan of the 20-Minute Call, I'd like to invite you to be a member of a budding community with me on Patreon. By becoming a patron of the show, you can join me behind the scenes to discuss options for future guests and gain access to some show swag. It's pretty sweet. Details on how to become a patron can be found in the show notes. Okay, back to the show. Is there anything, before you say hit that 200 jump threshold to begin training for wingsuiting, is there anything that younger jumpers can do in terms of developing skills that will transfer over, that they should focus on more than not?
Yeah, tracking and angle flying, 100% transfer over. I didn't do much tracking or angle flying prior to wingsuiting, but after doing thousands of wingsuit jumps, now I can angle fly and track way more proficient than I should be able to for never doing it, because a lot of the body position stuff transfers directly over. And just through my coaching experience, I see if I take somebody who's got like 400 or 500 angle jumps, or even free flying in general too, just having the ability to fly your body, they hop in a wingsuit and it's like second nature to them. It's the people that only do hop and pops to get to that 200 jump number, or only do belly jumps to get to that jump number. They're still better off than the hop and pops, right? But it's just the diversity of knowing how to fly your body. You could even take a free flyer with 200-300 jumps or so that have done nothing but free flying, and they're going to be way better off in a wingsuit than somebody comparable that's only done belly jumping. It's just an overall body awareness.
You own a business now, and you're an arborist. Tell me about the journey. I mean, you've been a professional skydiver for so long, and now you're an entrepreneur. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so that was a weird change. I essentially started climbing trees. Skydive Carolina is just surrounded by trees. So unfortunately, 80% of the time that there's a cutaway, it lands in a tree. So we had a jumper out there that used to always climb and retrieve the canopies, and he slowly started phasing out as he was becoming a commercial pilot. So me and my buddy Dan Hammond decided that we were going to learn how to climb trees. And we started off with no knowledge, no equipment. We were both rock climbers, so we were essentially lead climbing trees, leaving quick draws in the trees and just scaling up these things. Eventually ended up getting a set of spikes, wire core harness, didn't really know what we were doing, but I was passionate about it, and I was like, wow, this is really fun. So I started taking money from every one of my paychecks to buy the proper equipment in order to start climbing trees, and I started doing it recreationally for the period of like almost a year. Over that period, I, for maybe 2 to 3 hours a day, would watch YouTube videos on how to double rope climb, single rope climb, like basically all of the climbing techniques that you could possibly do. And then I would walk out the front door of my camper to a tree and go practice them. So after doing it recreationally for about a year and becoming very proficient in it, I started doing more research and was like, I'm getting kind of burnt out on tandems. My shoulder, I've got a really bad shoulder. And I was like, this isn't sustainable for me. If I strap a chainsaw on me and do the same thing I'm doing for fun right now, it could be lucrative. So that kind of set us on another year-long journey of learning about business and starting it. We started off just doing side jobs here and there. I'm really proud of the progress that we've made in the past 3 years of full-time being in business. We're better climbers and have better equipment than the majority of tree services out there. And I think it's just a testament of what you can learn just through drive, ambition, and vision these days, right? You don't have to go to school or work for a company in the trade. All the information is available nowadays on YouTube and on Google. It just comes down to how bad you want it, and if you want to look up that information and take the time to do it for yourself.
I tell you, it's so impressive. I've seen a lot of the equipment that you guys have. And I'll be honest, as a business owner, I look at the equipment you guys have and I'm calculating dollars going, whoa, what does that cost? That piece of machinery looks legitimately very expensive. And you guys seem to be, pretty busy. But is there any part of this journey is there any part of what you do? Like, I feel like you don't feel fear. Do you feel fear about anything business-wise or skydiving?
Climbing-wise, yeah, not business. I've always been high risk, high reward. So I had no problem making the transition and going full-time into tree work. And if it failed, I had something to fall back on, right? The biggest thing that scared me was the climbing. And that's what made me get into it, because I didn't really have that fear. It's almost the fear that drives me and that adrenaline that you get from it. So when I started climbing, it's pretty terrifying being 80 to 100 feet up in a tree tied off to it. So that definitely drove me to want to do more of it. And I started getting more comfortable. But yeah, it's still scary. Being that high in a tree and cutting the top out of it, roping it down to itself, it definitely gives you a rush, and that's absolutely what I love about it.
You're an arborist. What goes into being to calling yourself an arborist? What is that process? So
to be an arborist is through ISA, and it essentially just proves that you have a basic knowledge of tree biology, of plant health care, of several aspects of tree care in general. So I started pursuing that. That was another 1,000 hours or so of research that I did, and buying study guides and reading books and whatnot, which was fundamental to the business. The knowledge that it gave us that we were able to pass on to clients when it came to estimates or just consultations in general. A few years after we started the business, I was able to pass those certifications, and there's several more as well that I'm looking at. I eventually want to get my master arborist. I'm looking at getting my tree risk assessment qualification, and then a CTSP as well, which is basically like an S&TA of the tree care world. As a business owner, I feel fear. If we have down months, or we have employees. And before we started recording, I said, how is business? And he said, hey, December, January, very, very quiet. February, with a little bit of a warm spell, the phones have been going off the hook. You clearly don't worry. Teach me, how can I become more like you? Don't get me wrong. I was a little bit worried about that. Our bank account was definitely dwindling. We do have a lot of equipment. Our expenses, our month-to-month, day-to-day expenses are insane. And it seems like all the bills happen to come up when the account is low, right? So there was a period of time that I'm stressing, but we try to just continue to market and just control the things that we can control, right? If we're doing everything that we can and things aren't working out, then we can tell ourselves there's not much more that we can do in the moment, right? As long as you're doing everything that you can do, then hopefully the rest ends up working out. And luckily it is. What does a typical day look like for you? Typical day, wake up at, 6:30, 7 o'clock. Depends what I'm doing. If I'm doing tree work, I'm hooking up the equipment, I'm sharpening saws, I'm doing all the maintenance, oiling, greasing all the machines, looking over all that stuff. Driving to the job. From there, it's either climbing or lift work. Long, hard days of work. I thought skydiving was bad and I wanted to get out of it because I had a bad shoulder. Climbing is horrible. It's fun, but it is incredibly hard work. So it's usually 7 to 8 hours in a tree or so. And then clean up, dumping the debris, going back home, getting a good meal. Sometimes that's the first time that I eat throughout the day, and then getting some sleep and doing it over again.
Do you ever arrive at a job where it's going to be money in hand, right? Like they want to hire you, but you're looking at the job, it's so technical. Have you ever been scared on a certain job going, whoa, this is major right here?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we turned jobs down here and there. A lot of good businesses do. A lot of bad businesses will take all of those jobs on and suscept themselves to an insane amount of liability or personal risk. And we don't do that. I went out shortly after starting the business and I got EHAP certified. So I'm certified to work around power lines within the minimum approach distance. And through that course, I decided that I wasn't going to do it. It's one of the largest causes of fatality in the industry. So if there's primary power lines in play, I'm not going to work close to them. If there's huge amounts of decay in the tree and there's no way to get my spider lift to it and it's something that I have to climb and I don't have good rigging points around it, I'm going to turn the job down, right? At the end of the day, myself and my crew are going to go home safe.
Awesome. Do you read a lot?
No. No, I don't. I tend to just watch videos on YouTube. That's my thing. Yeah,
no judgment whatsoever. It just seems like when you put your mind to something, you go at it at 1,000%.
I do, yeah. I mean, I've had an addictive personality my entire life, and I've learned in the past 10 years or so to take that and use it to my advantage. I turn that addiction into passion, which turns into drive, and nothing will stop me from accomplishing that goal that I set.
It's so interesting. It's so admirable. It's funny, Anthony, what I've noticed in interviewing a lot of high achievers like yourself in the sport is that money is never a worry. Right, I interviewed Gustavo Cabana, and he came to the U.S. with next to nothing, and he's traveling across the country, and trying to get a gig, and he's just never worried about it. And the irony of it is because he was never worried, he was so focused on the passion that he excelled. He made a way because the heart was driving it, not the brain and trying to make the buck. That resonates with you, I take it.
Yeah, 100%. I lived in a camper for 8 years. I lived paycheck to paycheck, and I didn't care. Those are the best times of my life. I had everything that I needed to survive. I had a roof over my head. I had food. Didn't matter what the food was, right? Sometimes it was ramen. Sometimes I'd get fancy and get a steak. But yeah, I was the same exact way. As long as I woke up happy and healthy the next day, that's all that mattered to me.
I want to understand you a little bit better because I know a lot of superficial stuff. You're a hard-charging athlete. You're extremely passionate. You're essentially living a life by intention. But if I were to ask your friends, tell me who Anthony is, what he's about, what he stands for, what would they say?
Man, I don't know. That's a tough one. I don't really put myself in that situation a lot or think about that too much. I would hope or would think that they would say that I'm humble. I feel like not necessarily strived for that, but I feel like that is just my personality. I don't care about recognition for things. I think that they would tell me that I'm a caring person and would do anything for other people, right? I'd give anybody the shirt off my back. I've lived without money. If somebody needs money, I'll give them money, right? Like, I think that they would say that I'm a compassionate person and that I'm a very caring person.
I asked one of your friends that, and they more or less told me what you just told me.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Okay. They said specifically that you're extremely thoughtful. Where do these traits come from, do you think?
I think a lot of the doctrines that I have were instilled at an early age from my mother. Amazing person, one of the most amazing women that I know. And I think that she did a really, really good job raising me, basically teaching me the things that I needed to become the man that I am now.
Tremendous. This podcast is sponsored by Beyond Marketing, the digital marketing agency for the skydiving industry. Now, I'm not a fan of lots of ads during a podcast. I mean, who likes ads? So I'll stop talking about how marvelously wonderful Beyond Marketing is. but if you're curious about what the amazing people at Beyond Marketing do to help drop zones and manufacturers thrive, then you should check out their website at dropzone.marketing. That's dropzone.marketing. I'd like for you to tell me a crossroads moment in your life. And the way I define a crossroads moment is, I'll give you an example. In the early 2000s, I was a golf pro. And then this old Chevy Astro van shows up in the parking lot that said Skydive Carolina Parachute Center with a terrible logo on the side of it. You know the van. And just out of my curiosity, I put my business card on that front windshield, asking the owner of that vehicle if they would leave a brochure in the pro shop about skydiving. And the very act of me just simply putting my golf professional business card on this van forever changed the trajectory of my life. If I hadn't done that menial action, you and I are not sitting across from each other right now having this conversation. I am likely not sitting in this country as a result of that action. Or another crossroads moment might be you say yes to something or you say no to something and they seem just like a normal, regular decision of everyday life. But that yes or that no takes you on a path. Can you describe a crossroads moment that had you not met that person or said yes or say no, we're not having this conversation right now?
I would say my crossroad moment is probably the second that I clicked cancel on my college tuition. That last semester that I was supposed to go back. That was one of the toughest decisions I've ever had to make in my life. And I was just sitting there thinking, like, what is going to result from this? What if skydiving doesn't work out? I'm throwing away the 4 years that I put into this. And in hindsight, I can remember that moment and the moment that I pressed that button, and I've thought to myself, where would I be at right now if I went back to school and I didn't go down this path of jumping, right? Everything that's happened since then, like, I couldn't have asked for a better situation. The people that I've met, the connections that I have now, like my 15 closest friends to me, I all met through jumping. Every opportunity that's been afforded to me has been through skydiving or because of skydiving. So I don't think I would have been happy continuing school and becoming a doctor. Whatever would have ended up playing out, it wouldn't have been me.
So I can't imagine being in your shoes to do that, especially being that you were so close to the end. You nearly had it done.
Yeah. A lot of people told me I was an idiot. All I had to do was go online and do a couple online classes, but I threw all of my credits away, and I told everybody and told myself, like, oh, I'll do it. I've got 6 years before my credits expire. I never did it. They all expired, so it was worthless. I mean, I still gained a lot of knowledge throughout it, but I don't have a piece of paper to show that.
While many would say that was foolish or whatever adjective, super brave. Right? Because I think we all are, not all, I don't think you, but many of us are living under societal norms or societal expectations, like you should finish college. No one wants to say, I didn't graduate, I was 6 credits short. But you are, on the flip side, doing something that many in society would wish to do, which is following our passions. So kudos to you. I feel like that's an incredible brave thing to follow your heart versus following what society expects us to do.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And that was the turning point where I started doing that. Up until that point in my life, I did follow societal norms, and I felt like I had to be a certain person, and I had to get a certain degree that my family would be happy with, because I have family members that have the same careers and whatnot, and I felt like I was doing things for the wrong reason and not for me, and that was the turning point where I think I started doing things for myself.
I imagine there's added pressure too, that you've got a brother who's, so intellectually, I mean, not that you're not incredibly intelligent, but, who's working for NASA and is, doing some extraordinary things, and you're charting your own path and you're your own person. But I would imagine having empathy that, how are people going to judge me?
Yeah, it did bother me a little bit at first. Well, I was sitting there ripping shoeies, drinking beers out of shoes with my friends in the garage, and they're asking about my family. And I'm like, yeah, my brother works the control arm for the International Space Station. But I love him. I'm super proud of him. It doesn't bother me because now I feel like I'm doing something a little bit more useful, but at the end of the day, as long as you're happy, man, and you're passionate about what you're doing, that's what life's about. So I'm not concerned with that anymore, really, at all. He's doing what he loves and I'm doing what I love.
What do you do when you're not jumping or running your business? What are you doing in your downtime?
What's downtime? I don't have too much of it. I used to do a lot of downhill mountain biking. I kind of slowed down on that a little bit. I still do quite a bit of rock climbing, so that kind of fills the gaps in between for me. And that's mostly it, man. Just a lot of work. If I'm not working or actively on the mountain or doing something physical, then a lot of times I'm doing more research. I'm trying to become a better businessman, better salesman, learning about the back end of business a little bit more. So a lot of research, which to me is enjoyable. I like learning about things that I enjoy, right? So yeah, that consumes a lot of my time.
When you're climbing, are you fully focused, or are you listening to music? Are you listening to podcasts? What do you listen to in general?
Like work climbing or rock climbing?
Work.
No, I'm 100% focused. No music. We have Bluetooth headsets, so I'm listening to the guys. I'm telling them everything that I'm doing. It's obviously an incredibly dangerous line of work, so I'm just hyper-focused the entire time.
Outside of when you're working professionally, what are you listening to? Do you listen to podcasts, music? What are you into?
I listen to some podcasts, mostly tree stuff. There's a couple tree care related podcasts that I listen to. And other than that, music. I like classic rock in general.
Can you imagine your younger self ever thinking you'd be listening to podcasts about trees?
No, I was actually not a fan of biology at all in college. I was really intensive in physics and biology and chem and all that stuff, and I didn't really enjoy it. Physics I always loved in school, and I'm glad I did because it's applicable in everyday life, believe it or not, and it's very applicable in what I do for a living. But biology I was never interested in or anything like that. And then now that I'm working in the industry, I've developed a passion for it, and now I enjoy it, and I'm going back and relearning the things that I didn't care about or pay attention to before. So no, I absolutely never would have thought about myself listening to podcasts about that stuff.
Let's close with some advice. What advice would you give to anybody coming into the sport? I've interviewed folks who they came into the sport because they knew right away from jump number one, they want a wingsuit. But you're an instructor, TI, AFF instructor, wingsuit coach examiner. So you've got a ton of experience. What is the best advice you can give both for progressing in the sport and also to be more intentional about how one lives their life?
Yeah, skydiving wise, I would definitely say seek coaching. I know everybody says it, but even if you don't have a dedicated coach at the drop zone that you're jumping at, I guarantee if you're a new jumper, I would really hope that there's somebody better than you at the drop zone. As long as you're jumping with somebody who's a safe jumper, who's better than you, you're going to continue to get better. That was fundamental to my progression, always jumping with somebody that was better than me. And luckily I had a mentor and did hundreds and hundreds of jumps with somebody like that. And aside from that, safety, man, like a lot of people don't understand the importance of the safety culture at the drop zone. And fortunately, it's changed a lot recently. I mean, we saw a record low of 9 fatalities last year. Staying safe overall is awesome, man. People don't necessarily see the importance of it in the safety culture, and they just want to do things for Instagram, and it's not cool. It doesn't make you look cool at all.
And how about living an intentional life as you do?
Man, when it comes to living an intentional life, just care less, to be honest. I hate to put it that way, but you can still set goals. You can still have drive, ambition, and vision. But if you care less about the things that you don't have control over, then you'll see more things going well, right? With nothing else changing, it's just your perspective. If you care less about the things you can't control, everything will seem like it's going better overall. And it generally will. Everything comes down to a positive mindset and a positive attitude.
That makes so much sense. And I love that. I know it sounds almost a throwaway, like just care less, but in the frame that you've put it, yeah, 100%. Anthony, I just want to say, as an observer of you for a really long time, and often I've seen Tony Narlington, rolling through the drop zone. It is such a likable, I don't even know how to say that. It is such a likable character, because I know that it's part of you as well. because it's that careless attitude. You're just joie de vivre. You're just living life. It's so refreshing. It's so likable. And it's also admirable too that person is also very thoughtful and caring about their friends and is very focused on safety. It's like you could have it all, but I think you're a great ambassador for the sport, and I'm appreciative of your time.
Thank you, James. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, man. Likewise. Thank you again for joining me.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Cheers. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to the 20-Minute Call podcast. Please do follow us on your podcast app so you always have the latest episode, which is released every Monday. If you want to contact the team, our email address is podcast@beyondmarketing.xyz. This episode was edited and engineered by Garnet Znydrick of the YouTube channel Blue Skies Fun Days. Thanks for listening, and join us next week for our next episode.